Hi, this is Holly from ShinyShiny and this is my OnePlus One. Now you might notice that I said my OnePlus One, that's because this is my actual personal handset. I bought this late last year as a result of all the reviews, kind of the first round reviews and all the hype about this phone. It is kind of a techies phone, a little bit of a hipster phone in the sense that it's a bit difficult to get hold of. You have to have an invite to buy this phone most of the time, although they do occasionally do kind of promotions where you can get hold of one without needing an invite. And weirdly at the moment they're doing a thing where you can buy one without an invite on Tuesdays, which is a little bit questionable if you ask me. I think you should either make it so you can buy the phone or you can't, you know. Why does it need to be Tuesday? It's nuts. Anyways, so this is my phone. So I've had it as my main phone for the last couple of months. I've been using it every single day, which means I can give you a really clear review of what's good about it and what's not so good about it. And there's a fair bit of both. So if we take a little look at the handset first off, first thing you might notice, and the first thing I noticed when I took it out of the box, is it's very large. This has a 5.5-inch screen, which doesn't sound that big maybe in theory, but when you kind of receive it, you do go, that's a really big phone actually. And I mean, I've used kind of 6-inch phones before obviously, but it still feels quite a lot larger than I think it maybe looks in the photos. So that's worth knowing, especially if you can get your hands on one before you go ahead and buy one, you know, just to see how it gets on with your hands and how you feel about kind of using something as large as that, especially for phone calls. I think some people feel a little bit silly with the more phablet end phones. The handset itself, this is the Sandstone Black Edition. There is also a white one, although that seems to be rarer, especially because the invites are specific to the model of the phone and there don't seem to be many of the white ones around. It has an interesting texture on the back, which you'll see gets extremely mucky. It's quite gross. It's quite difficult to clean because it's a very strange texture on the back there that I haven't seen from another phone. It's kind of weirdly somewhere between sort of like a granite finish and something like felt or flocking. It's a horrible finish. I absolutely hate it, which is why I had to immediately buy a case for this phone, even though I didn't really need one. Just to kind of make it so I didn't have to touch that because I hate it. We have fairly subtle branding, so there's no branding on the front whatsoever. You've just got the little camera there, and on the back you've got OnePlus and Cyanogen. Now, Cyanogen is a third-party kind of modified version of Android, so this isn't stock Android. It's something that a lot of people install on their phones voluntarily to kind of improve performance and things like that, and it offers a lot more customization options as well than stock Android does. And obviously because it comes with Cyanogen rather than a manufacturer kind of overlay, then that means that you're not going to have any sort of bloatware or anything like that. So there's nothing like that on this, whereas if you're used to buying phones from kind of HTC, from Sony, you're going to be used to having lots of manufacturer apps. So none of that, which is quite nice. Performance is very good, it's very zippy, everything can be customized on this phone. I mean, if you see like the way that I'm moving between the screens there, that is one of the many things that you can choose to change on this. I mean, there's 4 different options for how you want the battery to display, for instance. You know, do you want a circle, do you want a battery, do you want nothing at all, do you just want a number? There's all kinds of options. So if you're a tinkerer, you will love this phone. But there are some downsides to it as well. There's a few things that I've had issues with. For example, the Wi-Fi on this phone, I just have a strange little bug with it where it kind of gets stuck. So there's a hospital that I walk past on the way to work. It's about 10 minutes walk away from my work. And for some reason, every single day, the phone latches onto the Wi-Fi networks around the hospital and then won't let them go. So when I get to work, it still thinks that it's in that area where the hospital is, trying to connect to all the Wi-Fi around there, and it won't pick up anything that's around here. And it's done it a few times where it gets stuck in a particular location and it just won't accept that it's not there anymore and those networks are not actually in range, and it won't find the ones that are in range. I found that quite frustrating, particularly because there's no easy way to fix it. So you can't just turn Wi-Fi off and on again and that's fine. Sometimes I found if you go into the advanced Wi-Fi settings and kind of mess about with stuff, turn something on and then turn it off again, that sometimes helps, but sometimes you have to reboot, and I found that really frustrating. This isn't necessarily something that other people have had problems with, by the way. I haven't really seen many reports of that on kind of the OnePlus Reddit page or anything like that, so may just be a fault of my one, I'm not sure. Similarly, I've had faults with the backlight, so when I'm kind of using my phone last thing at night, I will turn the backlight really far down. I'm going to try and demonstrate this now, and sod's law means that it probably won't happen, but I promise you it does happen a lot. So if I turn the brightness way down, and then I go on, say, Twitter, and then this only happens if you scroll. So we'll try scrolling and see if it happens now. I bet it's not going to do it, but what happens when I'm kind of using this last thing at night is that it will randomly bring up the brightness. So the brightness will go up and down and fade in and out. Suddenly it will just turn really bright for no reason, and that's quite annoying when you're trying to get to bed basically, and your eyes have got used to a dimmer screen, and then suddenly it's kind of floodlight to the face. So typically of my phone reviews, it's not going to play ball and do it, but you'll have to take my word for it that does happen a lot, and it's very annoying. So that's one of the bugs I've had with it. Another bug that I've had with it is that if I take a picture on the camera, and especially if you set up the thing where you kind of go straight to the camera from the lock screen, this seems to happen more often, but I'll take a picture and for whatever reason it just doesn't appear in the gallery for a good couple of minutes. Sometimes it's been 2 whole minutes before the photo appears in the gallery, and that's really frustrating. If you see something interesting and you get a good shot of it and you want to tweet that, or you want to share it and it's just not there, all you can do is just wait for the phone to sort itself out, and I find that quite irritating. Again, it's not something I've seen widely reported, so maybe this is just me. We don't know, but let's try doing that and see if we get anywhere with it. So if I'm not going to take a selfie. So if I take a picture of the keyboard, so I've taken a picture of the keyboard. Okay, that's come straight into gallery, so it doesn't happen all the time. But again, you just have to trust me that it does happen enough that it's been quite frustrating. And it did happen to me yesterday with a screenshot, and that screenshot took 2 minutes. I timed it to turn up in the gallery. That's not acceptable. Even if it only happens sometimes, that's really irritating and just not something that you should be having on a phone like this. Having said that, it's a very inexpensive phone for what it is, and this is why it's been so popular, or one of the reasons why it's been so popular, because this costs £269 and it does have very, very good specs for that. I mean, it's got kind of a 3100 mAh battery, which is really high. We'll get onto the battery in a minute because I've had some little issues with that. The 5.5-inch Full HD screen, it's not higher than Full HD, but it's 1080, so that's pretty good. Screen's very colourful, and it's got 3 gig of RAM and 64 meg of storage on this model. The lower down model, the white one, is £229, so £40 cheaper, and it only has 16 gig of storage. So I think that extra 40 quid is just kind of a no-brainer for whether you're going to buy this phone, because that's so little to pay for all that extra storage. I would definitely spring for that one. I guess the biggest issue with this phone, apart from the fact that it's from kind of an unknown brand, obviously people don't know who OnePlus are, and they were founded by somebody who used to work at Oppo, which again is not a very well-known brand here, but in China it's pretty big, and they make some fairly amazing phones that are gradually going more global. So it's an issue that people don't really know who they are, and it's an issue that they haven't made any phones before this. This is their very first device. They've got, by the sounds of things, a lot more on the way, but currently this is their first one, and obviously the fact that you can only get it by invite, that does seem to have built a lot of hype for the phone, to be fair. But also that's going to put a lot of people off, because if they're looking to upgrade, or they kind of just want something now and you have to faff around and try and get an invite, and certainly until they brought out the Tuesdays scheme this week, it was really actually quite difficult to get hold of an invite. I mean, if you know somebody that's got a OnePlus One, they will get 3 invites over the course of the next few months after they've bought it, but there's no telling when they'll get the invites, and once you've got one, you only have 24 hours to use it, which is kind of a high pressure way to sell phones. I kind of always say to people when I get an invite, I've got an invite, does anybody want it? And then people have to go away and research, and that's a big decision to make on the spur of the moment. If you're thinking, but I've got 24 hours, I've got to claim it, it's kind of, that's not a great way to sell phones in my opinion. And I do think if they're going to make them freely available on Tuesdays, they should just go ahead and make them available, because that's crazy. One of the big things that you'll need to think about if you're buying this phone in the UK is whether you want to use 4G, because sadly, the OnePlus One does not work with the majority of UK 4G services. That's because we use the 800 megahertz frequency band for 4G in this country, and the OnePlus One doesn't like it. So if you want to use this phone on 4G, you've only got the option of EE or 3. EE's 4G works completely, whereas 3's works some of the time because it's split over 2 bands, and one of those 2 bands is the 800 one that doesn't work. So if you're on kind of O2 or Vodafone or giffgaff or anything else, you categorically cannot use 4G on this phone. One of the things that you might also want to know about if you're considering buying this phone is the camera. The camera's pretty good. It's a 13 megapixel main one and a 5 megapixel selfie, which is pretty high, especially for the price at £270 is pretty good. The camera on the whole performs fairly well. You can see example photos in the full text review, the link's in the description, but it does take good photos for the most part. I've had some issues with it being a bit slow sometimes, and certainly it's slower than when I first got the phone, so sometimes it takes a little bit longer. especially in certain modes. I've noticed the smart scene mode is pretty slow, so I've had a lot of people with their, kind of their eyes shut, you know, where I've been trying to take a picture and it's just taken a little bit too long to take it, but the auto mode is still fairly quick. Changing modes is very, very simple, so this is nicely designed. You just kind of scroll through like that, to just flick through to get to different modes. It is a little bit annoying if you're trying to go to a particular mode that you have to go blah, blah, blah. But it's not bad at all. I do quite like the camera app on this one. And the selfie camera is very good for the most part. Again, you can see example photos in the review, but I have had some problems with it sometimes in lower light. So for example, there's an example picture in the text review where I was in kind of a mid-lighted restaurant. You know, it was brightish for a restaurant, you know, you could kind of see fairly well. I was expecting the picture to come out absolutely fine. With most phones that I've used, it would have come out absolutely fine, and for some reason it's just unbelievably grainy. I mean, it's pretty much unusable, so that kind of irritated me. There's a few times where the camera hasn't performed as well as I expected it to, and that's a shame. But for the most part, again, for the money, it's a very good camera. Now, the battery on this phone is one of the things that's been very highly praised in the reviews, and unfortunately I can't agree with those reviews because I just haven't had that good an experience with it, honestly. I mean, right now it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't been using this very much at all today. I've kind of listened to some music and read some Twitter on the way into work, and then I've mostly been using my laptop at work, so it hasn't had heavy usage today. And for a full 100% charge this morning, we are at 48%, and I think that's fairly poor. I mean, granted, I have been a little bit spoiled by phones like kind of the Xperia Z3 and the LG G3, which, you know, can last 2 days fairly easily on moderate use. But still, having said that, I expected this to be better. Initially, when I got the phone, I think one of the reasons I was having poor battery performance is that I had the phone on quite bright, I had the screen on bright, and so that was draining the battery quite quickly, so obviously it's a large HD screen. But even putting it on auto brightness, it just drains much more quickly than I would expect it to. I've had to start carrying around my portable charger again, which I haven't had to do for the last few phones because they've been able to last without it. You know, it's quite often that by sort of mid-evening it really, really needs a charge. And I'm really disappointed by that. I mean, again, it's not something I've seen in other people's reviews, so it may be that I have a faulty one, it may be that I have a difficult one. It may be related to that backlight issue that I mentioned earlier. So the fact that the backlight will flicker when I've got it turned down makes me think that there might be a fault with that, and that might be something that's draining the battery. Certainly if I go into battery settings and I have a look at the things that are taking up the largest percentage of my battery usage, it's usually the screen. So yeah, I'm not sure. It could be that I have a 41, or it could be that people who reviewed it initially kind of hadn't used it day to day all the time. I'm not sure. But that's certainly something I've experienced. So a fair few niggles, I think, with this phone. Just a fair few things that have irritated me. Not enough to not love the phone, because I do love the phone. And I think it's excellent for the price. And it's quite fun having one of these, because you do often get people kind of coming up to you and going, is that a OnePlus One? You kind of like, yeah, I've got a hipster phone, you know. I feel a little bit cool. And, you know, kind of people asking you how you got an invite and things like that. I do also get comments about it being too large. You know, more than once now I've had somebody saying, are you taking a picture with your iPad? Ha ha ha, like, you know, it's massive. It's not that massive, it's not as big as an iPhone 6 Plus, but you know, people feel like they have to say that. So that's one of the nicer things about owning it, I think, is that you have a little bit of kind of nerd cachet. People are kind of impressed with you if they know what it is. That's nice, and there's a nice camaraderie as well between kind of OnePlus owners, because, you know, there aren't that many of us. That's quite a benefit, I think, to having this phone, is just having that little kind of tight-knit community. I think as well because it's CyanogenMod, because it's built on open source kind of modifications of Android, then there's quite a big developer community behind that as well, and they've been very interested in this phone because it's a phone that comes with CyanogenMod natively, whereas most phones have it put on afterwards. So that's been pretty interesting to kind of talk to other people with it, compare experiences. Again, no one's really had the same experience as me, so not sure if I'm just unique or I've got a broken one or what. But nothing's been particularly bad. There's nothing that's really irritated me about this. And on the whole, I think it's a very well-made phone, especially from a brand new brand. You know, we haven't had anything from OnePlus before to compare to. I've been very impressed with this for the money, especially given that it's a new thing on the market and they weren't really sure what to do with it. And the fact that it just proves that you don't really need a £1 million marketing campaign to sell a phone, because this has done incredibly well. There's a lot of people that have this phone now. Well, not a lot by mainstream standards, but a lot for kind of an unknown. And that's kind of one of the downsides as well to having this phone, is that as well as people coming up to you and saying, oh wow, OnePlus, you also get people saying, what phone is that? And you go, oh, it's a OnePlus One, and you feel like a bit of an idiot because you know they're not going to know. and they go, so like a Samsung? Kind of like, no, it's this Chinese brand, they're not really very well known, and they're doing it by invites, and you end up trying to explain, but often it's quite interesting to explain it to people, and people are often really interested to hear about it and kind of go away and learn a little bit more about it. But you do get a lot of confused looks. If you have to bring your phone network for any reason, by the way, and you get asked what phone model you're using, I've never yet had a representative from Vodafone who knew what a OnePlus One was. And it's a little bit frustrating when, if you're having technical issues with your network, for instance, they have a list of phones in front of them so that they can tell you what to press and what to do. And if you say that it's a OnePlus One, they just don't know what to tell you. But, again, if you're kind of the person that likes having something a little bit different, you might find that quite enjoyable. I find it a little bit frustrating. Equally, if you're the sort of person who might need to get your phone repaired at some point, it's got a Gorilla Glass, so the screen probably isn't going to shatter. You'd have to really go out of your way to smash this screen. But if you do have technical issues with it and you're the kind of person that would need to take it to a repair shop rather than kind of working on it yourself, then you are going to struggle with this one, because again, they're going to know the mainstream Android phones. They're not probably going to know how to fix this. So overall, as to whether I would recommend it, I think I would hugely recommend it if you're a tinkerer, if you're somebody who's interested in CyanogenMod and kind of modified versions of Android, if you're happy to have a phone that's slightly different and perhaps put up with some kind of bugs and teething problems as a result of that. And also bearing in mind that a lot of people on the OnePlus forums have kind of reported that it's quite difficult to get returns and replacements and things like that. I personally haven't had to contact support, but I have heard quite a lot of horror stories about people just never getting a response or never getting their replacements. So not too sure how likely it is that you would be able to get another one if you did have a fault. I'm not sure. And certainly I haven't had any response from them when I've tried to speak to them about kind of press and reviews and things like that. And it's one of the reasons I ended up buying the phone, because as well as wanting it, I did really want to review it, and they just were not willing to cooperate with review samples, unfortunately. So yeah, if you're a tinkerer and you're kind of a big Android fan and you want to have something a little bit different and something that's very good value for money certainly, and you're willing to put up with a couple of little niggles, then this is probably a good phone to choose. However, it does suffer from the fact that the LG G3 has come down considerably in price and is now available SIM-free on Amazon for £300, which is only £30 more than this. And the specs are very, very, very similar. It's almost the same, but the G3 has got that Quad HD screen, so if screen resolution is a big deal to you, that's an obvious choice, I think, for another £30. And also, just obviously, LG is a much more reliable, much more well-known brand. So if you're the kind of person who's a little bit wary of kind of buying something that might break or go wrong and you're not really sure what you're going to be able to do to fix it, you probably will be better off getting something a little bit more trusted and well-known and kind of that your phone network will have heard of and the repair shop will have heard of. And the G3 as well is just an excellent, excellent phone, and the battery life problems that I've had with this are just not the case. So that's definitely something to think about. I would compare the two phones very carefully given how closely priced they are, and given that the G3 has a little bit of an edge in terms of the screen and things like that and the battery life. But if you're pretty keen on a OnePlus One and you're more than happy to kind of have people walking up to you and asking what it is, and you're more than happy to go, oh, that's a little bit rubbish, but teething problems, then I think you're going to really like this phone. We got an update to it this morning that added kind of native Swift key features and some audio features as well. Stuff like that is great to have, and it's not really stuff that you get from mainstream phone manufacturers very often. It's also going to be one of the earliest ones to get Lollipop, because obviously the developers of CyanogenMod are working flat out to try and get their version of Lollipop available now, because they know that they've got an audience of nerds who are desperate to have it. I'm certainly desperate to have it. When I got that update this morning, I was kind of like, is it Lollipop? Is it Lollipop? And it wasn't. I just want my Lollipop. But yeah, it's going to be earlier than I think some manufacturers will be for getting that. So if that's the kind of thing that appeals to you, again, it's a nerd phone, so it understands you. And finally, on that point, if I go to shut down the phone, just the fact that it says reboot and not restart, that right there tells you it's a phone for geeks. So if you're interested in the OnePlus One, take a look at the full text review. The link is in the description to kind of see photo samples and things like that. And thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.